Hello and welcome. I'm Clarisse Fortuné and you're watching Eye on Africa, our top stories. Schools will stay closed until further notice in Kenya as heavy rains that killed hundreds of people continue, and the worst may be yet to come. As the world marks Press Freedom Day, Reporters Without Borders says the biggest threats facing journalists are political authorities, including on the continent. And the Nigerian film industry on the French red carpet. The Nollywood Week Film Festival is back in Paris. This year is all about the best of African storytelling and cutting-edge technology. Heavy rains and floods continue the path of destruction across Kenya. Homes, bridges and other infrastructure. But also a heavy toll. More than 200 people have died since March and many people missing. But President William Ruto says the worst may be yet to come. Kenya is on alert as it could face its first ever cyclone.
Sadly, we have not seen the last of this perilous period, as the situation is expected to escalate. Meteorological reports paint a dire picture. The rains will persist, increasing both in duration and intensity for the rest of this month and possibly after.
And our correspondent Olivia Bizot reports from Nairobi, and she has the latest.
In his State of Address this Friday, Kenyan President William Ruto said that the planned reopening of schools next week will be postponed until further notice. That's as the heavy rains and floods continue to batter the country. Earlier this week, I was in Mathare, one of Nairobi's informal settlements, where thousands of people have been displaced because of the floods. A lot of them are now living in a local school as temporary shelter. They told me they didn't know where they would go once schools reopened. So this announcement by the president will be a huge sigh of relief for them, as it means that they can stay in the school for just that little bit longer. They are not alone. Since March, more than 165,000 people across Kenya have been displaced and more than 200 people have been killed. In his speech, President Ruto warned that the situation would be getting worse and that Cyclone Hidaya could hit Kenya's coast at any moment. It would be the country's first ever cyclone, and it's predicted to cause torrential rain, strong winds and powerful and dangerous waves, which could potentially cause a lot of damage along the coast. Kenya isn't the only country in the region to be experiencing heavier than usual rain. In Tanzania, more than 155 people have been killed in the floods. Hundreds of thousands of people in Burundi, Ethiopia and Somalia have also been affected.
And the United Nations expressed concern about the situation in the region, particularly for the refugees forced to flee again after losing their homes. Let's hear from some of them on the front lines of this climate crisis in Burundi.
I've never seen flooding like this. This water has never been this high. We were growing rice over there. This has been a bad year.
The flooding forced me to move out. The water has been rising here. We are a family of 10, and there are children as well who are in school. I am also a student. We often get late for class. When we moved here, we never imagined the water could ever reach this level. But it kept rising, so we decided to move out.
In Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 9 people were killed on the outskirts of Goma amid a fresh outbreak of fighting with the M23 group. The rebels seized yet more territory this week. Emmett Livingston in Kinshasa has more.
Tragedy struck Goma again on Friday, when at least 9 civilians in a displacement camp were killed in a barrage of artillery fire. Details remain unclear and the death toll is provisional, but local officials said that 9 people had been killed and several more injured. Some humanitarian sources said that the true death toll could be higher. Over 1 million people have been displaced by the 2-year-long M23 conflict, and about 600,000 live in dire conditions in overcrowded displacement camps on the outskirts of Goma. This latest violence underscores the extreme vulnerability the displaced people face. Goma is surrounded by M23 rebels who are backed by Rwanda, and many of the displaced people have been forced to camp to the west of the city, just kilometres from active front lines. This isn't the first time shelling has killed civilians in the camps, but it's one of the worst single losses of life. Congolese authorities blamed the Rwandan army and the M23 for Friday's deaths, with government spokesman Patrick Moyaya calling the attack barbaric and a war crime. The M23, for its part, blamed the government, accusing it of attacking the camp in an attempt to manipulate the international community. The conflict shows no signs of slowing. This week, for example, the M23 captured the highly strategic site of Rubaya in North Kivu province. Rubaya is home to a huge coltan mine, where informal diggers extract a mineral used in electronics. The Congolese government has repeatedly accused Rwanda of using the M23 group to gain control over eastern Congo's mineral resources, a claim that Kigali denies.
And 8 soldiers who were fighting against the M23 have been sentenced to death, including 5 officers, for desertion and cowardice. These are the first capital punishment sentences since authorities decided in March to lift a suspension on executions. Human rights groups have called on the government to abolish capital punishment for any crime. Russians and Americans side by side in Niger. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said Russian soldiers had deployed to an airbase that also houses American troops. Russians are to be in a separate compound without access to U.S. forces or equipment. Meanwhile, the Kremlin said that Russia was developing its ties with various African countries, including in the military sphere.
We are developing our relations in all areas, including defense, with various African states. They are interested in this. We are also interested in it. And we will continue to develop our relations with African states.
This Friday, May 3rd, is World Press Freedom Day. Media watchdog Reporters Without Borders warns that those who pose the biggest threat to journalists are the very people who are supposed to be protecting them, like governments on the continent, in the Sahel region. 9 websites were suspended just last week in Burkina Faso. An investigation journalist was also arrested in Niger. Both military powers running those countries are strengthening their ways towards media control.
Idrissa Soumana Maïga is the chief editor of L'Enquêteur, Niger's biggest investigative newspaper. He's been accused of threatening national security and jailed because of his article titled Alleged Installation of Wire Devices by Russian Agents in Official Buildings. His lawyer says Soumana's treatment is a glaring example of increasingly restricted press freedoms across central Sahel. Niger's military junta has been cracking down on dissident voice, and so is neighboring Burkina Faso, where at least 13 news and media publications have been suspended since 2022.
When you cancel all these media outlets, you're reducing public platforms. We still have a chance to speak up, so we should. We must call for international help, get the International Federation of Journalists involved, in addition to other unions, so we can help our colleagues and neighbors. We should be going ahead, but those regimes are holding us back. At least, when civilians got the power, counterpower was allowed. But in this situation, it's not possible.
Human Rights Watch, Reporters Without Borders, and other NGOs supporting free speech recently denounced again growing media restrictions in the Sahel. Foreign and local journalists are also persecuted by armed extremist factions operating in the region. Several have been kidnapped or killed over the last decade.
Now, they adorn the office walls of many leaders around the world or at the United Nations. I'm talking about Senegalese tapestry, a flagship of Senegal's independence. The production is now revitalized thanks to new partnership, including with fashion giant Chanel. Clémence Valère has more on the story.
They represent a key component of Senegal's cultural policy, tapestries. The creations of the Senegalese manufacturers of decorative arts in Thiès are internationally renowned and can be found adorning the walls of many presidential palaces, as well as international organizations such as the UN in New York or the African Union in Addis Ababa.
The special thing is the quality, because our carpets can last more than 15 years, depending on how well they're cared for, compared with other carpets on the market. There are carpets made here at MSAD that are more than 40 years old.
Senegal's national tapestry production was established in Thiès by the country's first president, Léopold Sédar Senghor, 6 years after the country gained independence from France. Following Senghor's departure and changing fashion trends, production in Thiès almost disappeared. Today, the factory is diversifying its creations, producing rugs, batiks or ceramics, which directors say are slightly more affordable than the wall tapestries, which costs around 2,300 euros per square meter.
We thought, why not make products that will be accessible to everyone? So those who can't buy tapestries or floor rugs can at least benefit from other products from the factory, such as prayer rugs, batiks, ceramics and books.
In order to generate more national and international interest for the creations, the factory has also opened its doors to tourists and film crews. According to the managing director, 14 rooms will soon be available for visitors, as well as an artist's residence.
The 11th edition of the Nollywood Week Festival is taking place in Paris. People have until this Sunday to enjoy what the Nigerian film industry has to offer: movies, animation, virtual reality experience, and video game. Yes, this year the festival opens its door to new technologies, with the second largest film producer in the world is increasingly embracing. Sophie Lamotte attended the event for us.
For its 11th edition, the Nollywood Film Festival meets in the cinema in central Paris to celebrate the second biggest film industry in the world. Among the roughly 2,000 Nollywood films produced a year, roughly 20 will be displayed here this weekend. And this year, the organizers have set their sights on the future. They've dedicated this edition to the influence of technology and virtual reality on the development of the industry.
The theme is basically about connecting through technology, but also connecting through humanity. Because it's 360, it's fully immersive, so you feel like you're there and you can understand this far distant reality almost as though it's happening around you, and that connects people even more to other people's reality.
The Nigerian film industry has 150 million viewers across the world every year, and its organizers hope to build even more bridges between African cinema and European audiences through this festival, but also they aim to offer a critical reflection on Nigerian society.
Nollywood really gives you that internal point of view, you know, like through internal lenses, you get to understand different cultures, different societies, societal norms. As a filmmaker, I think Nigerians are very aware of their responsibility, which is to get their society as a whole to evolve and to break barriers and boundaries.
Two of the most highly awaited films this year are a virtually augmented story of the Chibok kidnapping that happened 10 years ago in Nigeria, as well as the film All the Colors of the World, a story about two young men navigating a gay relationship, a daring topic in Nigeria where the law punishes all same-sex relationships. The festival runs all weekend, and the jury will reveal the name of the winning film on Sunday.
And as they say, the end. That's the end for our edition. Thank you for watching Eye on Africa, and stay tuned for more news.
Sao Paulo, a vibrant city today, but with deep scars from the past.
Esquecer nunca, lembrar sempre.
In this building, thousands of prisoners were tortured. 50 of them didn't make it out.
Presidente Lula, o Estado nos deve isso. Brasileiros, nós merecemos que o governo se posicione.
60 years after, voices ring out over the horrors of the dictatorship. Voices that refuse to be stifled and demand justice. The Centre for the Preservation of Political Memory holds memories and warnings.
Se você não olha o seu passado, você corre o perigo de repeti-lo.
A contested past, an ongoing quest for truth and justice. Brazil's dark era on France 24 and France24.com.